Yo, man. I can see why a lot of people are into Parasyte the Maxim. Episodes 1 through 4 were pretty good, but episodes 5, 6, and 7 are game changers. Yo, they're straight up game changers. I did not expect Shinichi's mom to die the way she did. Like, that was messed up. Yeah, you have Pops, you have Mom. They're nearby the town, and they're at some random cliffside, and they're just watching the sunset, and everything seems all peachy hunky-dory. All of a sudden, Parasyte, head off. And then a few minutes later in the episode, she winds up going to Shinichi's house. And the psychological shock that Shinichi experienced at that point in time was devastating. Like, he really felt for the dude, because his mom was just killed, and he knew that. He knew, but he couldn't believe it. And you have Migi trying to fend her off, but Shinichi wouldn't do it. In fact, Shinichi was willing to cut him off, cut his arm off, just to maintain this false notion that his mom was alive and well. And to have this extreme psychological shock inflicted upon Shinichi, only to have his mom, who's now a parasite, who's now being controlled, she's dead, whose body's being controlled by a parasite, have him get stabbed through the heart and walk away as if it was not a big deal. And then him on the floor, dying. Yo, mainly episodes 5 and 6, like, they're real game changers. Episode 7 is the cherry on top, where he kills his mom with the help of another half-infected parasite named Uda. And in his case, it's like his neck, his lower jaw, and like his chest, like they're all infected by the parasite. But his brain is still intact. So it's kind of weird in that sense, because mainly in his case, the parasite that he calls Parasyte, it controls his jaw for the most part, unlike Shinichi where it's his arm. So it's a little bit odd, but whatever, we'll take it. Point here is that they kill his mom, and then everything's said and done. They leave this other town where the hospital's located, meet this one girl named Maki in episode 5 or episode 6. Episode 6. But she's not that prevalent in the story. She really isn't. I mean, like, she just appears to be a support character for this particular section of the story. Now, whether or not Maki's going to have a greater role in the story later on, I'm not too sure. Because the series is old when it comes to the manga. It's actually a fairly old manga. But I haven't read it, so I don't know what's going to happen. But the thing here is that you have his mom getting killed, finally. The body's no longer being controlled, fell in the ocean. And then the episode ends off with Shinichi going back to his hometown. And he's wearing his school uniform, and he has a complete change. Like, all of a sudden, like, we got a badass over here. Like, his hair is all slicked back, like he's pulling the icing. And I'm like, God damn. Like this guy, like, at any moment, Shinichi will take off his, like, uniform, and you'll see a giant S. Shinichi. Like, yo. Like, calm down, Soups. Calm down. So, it's fascinating to see. In 3 episodes, he goes through this dramatic character change. And one of the main things about his character change that is so fascinating is this inhuman aspect where the events unfold to where he becomes more and more and more inhuman. It was stated in episode 4 that, by Tamiya, that there was something off about Shinichi. And she couldn't really pinpoint him, but he was no longer pure. So after episode 4, episodes 5, 6, and 7 just so happened to be one of the main themes that's being discussed is this inhuman transition. Like, what it means to be human. What it means to maintain a human psyche. Because episode 5, he's still predominantly a human being, obviously. And he still cries whenever something sad happens. He's still Shinichi. He's not really changed. Episodes 6 and 7, he changes because Migi has to infuse himself in the heart of Shinichi. And what winds up happening, we find out later on in the episode 7, where part of Migi's body, his pieces, if you would, they are now inside of Shinichi's bloodstream. So what this has allowed is, in a sense, a physical power for Shinichi. Shinichi, he no longer requires glasses. He can see. Honestly, it's a very Spider-Man-esque transformation. He can see very clear without his glasses. He can jump much faster. I mean, he can jump much higher. He can run much faster. Apparently, he can run at Olympic athlete speeds for a much longer distance. And he can actually now compete against Parasytes without Migi's help. Migi transforms into a blade so he can defend himself, but for the most part, he can dodge the attacks of a Parasyte just fine. And that transformation coincides with him becoming less human. Because throughout the course of the series, there's been hints of him slowly transforming, slowly becoming less and less, human. Something abnormal. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, whether he is ascending or he's becoming more primitive, we're not too sure. Because we don't know that much about the Parasytes to begin with. But it's fascinating because he's making this transition. And in episode 5, there's a girl named Kana. She's not introduced. She appears to be someone who's going to have actual relevance. Unlike Maki, who seems to be only relevant for like that short period of time, Kana seems to be a lot more relevant. Because Kana, I said before in my first impressions of this particular series, that the women seem to have this, if you would, enhance a woman's intuition where they can kind of tell that something is off with an individual who is being controlled by a parasite. But in the case of Kana, it is enhanced tenfold, where apparently, according to Migi, she is overly perceptive, where she can actually sense the brainwaves that these parasites give off to one another, that they emit in general. So when she's shaking, at the end of episode 5, she's shaking the hand of Shinichi, she stares at his hand like she knows that there's something funky with this hand. So, I mean, like, maybe he fabs too much. Who the hell knows? At least that's what maybe she was thinking. But the point here is that she knows that something's off. And at the beginning of episode 5, when Shinichi's trying to save his friend, I think his name was Nagai, and he's getting the beatdown, and they're all getting the beatdown. And Kana chills like, I don't know what this guy's name was, but he's like the head of like the hoodlums, the punks, the thugs, and she stares at Shinichi like, why would you do this? And all of a sudden, like, she's very perceptive. She can like see something else inside Shinichi. We see an eyeball that's kind of like yellow greenish, and his eyes are innately brown. So there's some change that she noticed, that this guy is not completely normal. So it's fascinating because we're seeing Shinichi. Again, episodes 1 through 4, it was hinted at. But episodes 5 through 7, it's where it is distinct. Where Shinichi is going through this inhuman metamorphosis. And he's trying to maintain his human... He's trying to maintain a regular human psychology. If you would. Psychology, I don't think is the right word, but whatever. Moving on. Point here is that a lot of times he realizes that the guys around him, even people like Uda, again, he's like a semi-parasite, just like Shinichi. He cries. That's a very human-esque trait. He cries when things are good, when they're bad. I mean, he tells them the story of his life, pretty much, Shinichi. And Uda starts to cry, because he's very unfortunate. But he cries, too, because he's happy, because he's not the only person in the world with this particular situation. I mean, Shinichi thought the same way at the start of the series, that he was like the only person with this certain situation. He was the only one that knew what was happening in the world with these parasites. But no, he's not alone. Someone else does know. And that's Uda. And there's probably other folks across the planet just like them. where the situation happened to be the case where the parasite couldn't control their body fully. It couldn't reach the brain. So they wound up having certain parts of the body that are, you know, like Shinichi's, where the bodies can morph and turn blades and fight off against other parasites. So when he realizes that, not only can Uda cry in that situation about hearing his life story and being fortunate in the sense of meeting someone else like him, but also seeing his dad cry because his dad knew that his mom, that his wife, that Shinichi's mom had passed away, was killed by this monster, but was told else by the doctors in the hospital that he hit his head and he had a nightmare, some shit like that, and he was confusing the two. And how Shinichi, he wanted to cry so bad, but he couldn't cry. So that human trait, that very humanistic emotion, he could not perform. He was hurt, but he couldn't cry. He couldn't do it. It couldn't happen. So maintaining human psychological aspects is very important to Shinichi because he doesn't want to be perceived to be a monster just like the parasites walking around committing the mincemeat murders. So that's a very important element in the story now. Where at first it was, you know, like not that big of a deal, but now it's a huge deal because Shinichi has gone through an extreme metamorphosis and now he wants to maintain these human traits, these humanistic traits. So I do like that a lot. To me, it actually makes the story a lot more interesting, a lot more deeper, if you would. Because in a sense, now you have this tug of war between what Shinichi wants and what is the reality of his own body transformation. Now, again, events unfolded to where it was accelerated because this may have been happening on a slow scale anyway, given the fact that Migi was a part of his body, and given the fact that you had someone like Tamiya and also someone like Kana realize that there was something else going on with Shinichi. And that was all before Migi went into Shinichi's chest to heal his heart when his heart got stabbed. But when he did so, that was accelerated tenfold, and it's even more so now because you know that parts of Migi are now within Shinichi's bloodstream. In fact, more or less, Migi says that the Migi that you see before you, that comprises your right arm, only accounts for 70% of Migi. 30% of Migi is in very small fragments that can't really sense one another because they're so small. But they have enhanced the body of Shinichi, and some of the parts may be in his brain, which what he fears, because if that's the case, then he can no longer be considered a human being at that point in time. I mean, now he's teetering. Now he's like in between human and parasite. But if a parasite that's a part of Migi winds up realizing that it's inside of, that it is inside of Shinichi's brain, it could possibly take over. So it's a very fascinating situation because now all of a sudden he is at complete risk of losing his humanity. In fact, he's at risk of dying, period. Because you never know when Migi could take over his brain. Like, all of a sudden, like, the story, episodes 5, 6, and 7, they make the story blossom. And the potential that was there in episodes 4 and episodes 1 through 4 is now realized in episodes 5, 6, and 7. So, this story is the shit. This story is the shit, man. Yo, I'm digging this right now. I'm digging this heavy. So, I'm going to go watch episodes 8 and 9 right the fuck now. And I'm going to get my thoughts on that. I'll upload it like later tonight or tomorrow, who knows. And then we'll call it a damn day with Parasyte, because at that point in time, I'll be on board. But I don't think I'm going to give full-on reviews. I'm going to give my thoughts. I'm going to give my thoughts, and we're just going to call it a day. Because the animation and the pacing and that kind of stuff, I do like talking about that kind of stuff. However, it's not what really defines the story. The animation is good, the pacing is good, and there's very good character development. But it's the interesting concepts and ideals and notions that are constantly brung up in this story that I think really make it shine. Even though the circumstances as to where these questions arise are actually very dire, given the fact that the parasites themselves are dangerous to humanity itself. So again, it's a very fascinating situation. It's a very fascinating story. I'm digging it right now. So I want to watch episodes 8 and 9. I will see you guys and gals later. So King of Lightning, rate the video, comment, subscribe. Have a nice one.